Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg, as always, here to talk about college basketball. It is a holiday week, so there's not much going on. But Greg, how else are you doing?
Kind of bummed that there's not a lot going on in college basketball this week. We got a few nice games in the weekend, so I guess get a little time off, spend it with family and friends and whatnot. Got a couple decent games this weekend to talk about. So um, I know we're gonna have in the future. I don't know if you want to just jump right into stuff, but I know this week they said um, Diamond Head is moving to Feast Week instead of over Christmas. I think there should be more basketball around this time. I get the kids are on finals or they're on break or whatever, but I feel like you know now might be a better time to have like a neutral site MTE when students are on break and stuff. Joe, you had a differing opinion on that, so I wanted to make sure we brought it up.
No, I mean I'd love to have more games on TV. To be honest, I don't know how much they're willing to do with how many bowl games are on and how much NFL has now kind of monopolized some of the time. There's NFL games that started Saturday and Sunday this past week, and then there's also ones this Wednesday on Christmas. So that makes things tougher to sell these games and to get things done. I think they use this as a little break for the students. They can go home because they don't always get that during Thanksgiving. They kind of spend Thanksgiving away from their homes and getting them to spend the Christmas holiday or the New Year's holiday if possible with family. Could be a good thing for the students, and it's also in between semesters too, so they get a real break. It's not like they're like still in school at this point. So I think it's more of a players thing and kind of making it manageable. But I would love to see it personally on the calendar because it would be more fun to watch that stuff. So Greg, I'm going to say this to you. You're a married man, but also to everyone else out there, because it's a light schedule, do your time now. Be the good boyfriend, be the good husband, be the good spouse that you need to be in these next week, because we're gonna get 3 good months of basketball after this, starting with conference play in a way that we haven't seen it. Greg, we have all these bigger conferences, so I expect there to be a lot more games to watch in these next 3 months leading up into March Madness. So if you wanted, like, hey, this is my little break from college basketball, this is the week to take it, and then you just go right back into watching it because it's going to be a lot of fun once conference play really picks up. We've had some games come and go already, but for the most part, they've kept the big matchups away from us so far. So excited to see that moving forward. All right, so Greg, let's recap what happened last week. We're going to start it off with the Florida and UNC game. This one was in the Jumpman Invitational in North Carolina. Obviously, not a home game for North Carolina though. Florida ends up winning this one 90-84. It starts off and like they're kind of like running away with it. UNC kind of cuts it back and kind of gets it close at the end to only lose by 6. But I don't know about you. It seemed like one of those where I think Florida. I was pretty confident they were going to win the whole time, and just kind of maybe when I go through it, maybe it'll kind of make it more clear. It's kind of like we talked about. It was RJ Davis putting up a bunch of numbers for UNC. There was, guys who played decently well, like Elliot Cadeau had 11 points, Seth Trimble had 11 points, and Ian Jackson had 11 points. But there wasn't much production from the post or the forward spots. That's kind of the Achilles heel of this North Carolina team, which could come back to bite them. Florida's guards played pretty well in this one too. So Walter Clayton probably had the worst game out of any of them. He still had 12 points, just 1 of 7 shooting from 3 and 4 of 15 from the floor. Florida kept on firing those shots up, even if they weren't really falling, and they got the win here. Really bolsters what they have done this season so far after maybe not playing the toughest schedule at this point.
Yeah, Carolina still has yet to take a bad loss, and we'll talk about another game they had later when we get to Saturday's games. But kind of noticed Carolina going a little smaller at times, and like Florida doing a lot of switching. And I mean, they said this on the broadcast, so I'm not saying anything revolutionary, but notice Ian Jackson was able to break down one of the big guys. Whether it was I don't remember exactly who it was. I don't know if Condon or they got that other bigger guy that I Hall or however you. I felt like I couldn't tell if they were saying Hall or Hawk, whatever. But he was able to get through, and I feel like in the second half, because Carolina shot the ball from behind the arc very poorly. But for years this team has kind of made their money getting inside, getting to the basket, and I really feel like they did do a better job of breaking down their individual man, and that created, those opportunities in the second half. Yeah, I mean, like Florida started off hot. They were hit. I was actually kind of surprised when I start looking at the team stats, and I'm like, man, Florida only shot like 35% from three, because I felt like at times, and maybe it was just like when they were hitting those threes, it felt like they shot better than that. Controlled the boards. The only thing you could nitpick, obviously, is the turnovers, which some of those are what helped Carolina get back into this game. So I think they had a somewhat clean first half, and there were a significant amount more in the second half. I, of course, picked Carolina to have a really big week, and happy they didn't fold. Easily could have folded after that first half, not going as well as you might want. But it's just weird, because it's like they don't have any bad losses, but like at some point they gotta have one of these wins, man. Like, and you start to think about, like, well, they were down big to UD, and they came back and won that game, and like they were almost run out of this gym in the first half. It's just like these slow starts seem to be killing them.
Definitely are killing them. North Carolina 2-5 in quad one games, no other losses on the season, 34th in the net. Talking about whether they could make the tournament is something that I think needs to start being kind of floated out there. It's not an exact science here at this point in the season, but I think it's going to be interesting to watch what they do in ACC play and seeing how many opportunities they get in ACC play, because I mean, right now it's like all quad one losses, so it's fine. But if you keep on dropping any opportunities you get, it could be dicey. I mean, it's not a for sure thing, and that puts a lot of pressure on the rest of the season for North Carolina, for Hubert Davis. So we will make sure to keep tabs on that. And as you said, we have another game to talk about there is coming up. But we'll move on through the rest of Tuesday first. We have Clemson and South Carolina. An egg on my face, Greg, because I said let's not pick this game. I think South Carolina stinks. I kind of still think that's the case, but we have Brett Brownell, and we just every time we start believing in the guy, start giving him any credit, he blows it. So Clemson loses this one. South Carolina gets the win 91-88. This was an overtime game. It's a good rivalry game in this one. I don't think I've seen a game like this in a while, where there's so much scoring by the starting lineup, which was South Carolina, that their bench scored 12 points the whole game. That's kind of crazy for today's age of college basketball. And then you kind of look at the other side, and Clemson had like 17 points off the bench. But really, the SEC's dominance is kind of striking to me, because, again, I thought South Carolina wasn't that good, and I thought Clemson had some potential here, and they probably still do. But this game was kind of for me, it was kind of like, what is the ACC at this point, Greg? Who are the good teams in the ACC if North Carolina is struggling, if Clemson loses? Ian Shefflin has another good game, and Chase Hunter has a good game for Clemson. I think they can rebound and get better after this, but I still don't think South Carolina is that good of a team, and this one was kind of a head scratcher. They have losses to Indiana, Xavier, North Florida already this season. They have some decent wins: Virginia Tech, Boston College, and obviously Clemson. So it's not like they're just picking up wins over mid majors or low majors. But I don't know. What do you make of this one? Because this one was a little bit confusing to me, and I don't know how we got from point A to point B, other than Brad Brownell just being Brad Brownell.
Well, I mean, if you start looking at the hindsight a little bit, you remember that Kentucky win, which was obviously when we were like shaking our heads, can't believe that. That came at home, and now we go on the road to an SEC school. Like, it's like it's like a jigsaw puzzle that like the pieces like kind of fit together, and you just gotta kind of slam one in. It's like you could talk yourself into it, like, okay, like I guess I can make this make sense. Like, this game happened on the road, and it's against a rival, and it's against a team that is, even though they haven't played any conference games yet, as part of this conference that seems to be the juggernaut right now. And like you said, it's not like they have just been taking horrible losses. So I like top down big time thoughts is just like, man, I think this is just where we're at with the ACC. Like if they don't have, kind of every advantage of their favor, we just came from talking about a neutral site game that went to Florida. Here we are talking about a ranked Clemson team losing at, a mediocre South Carolina team that, like they don't have a lot. I mean, like Colin Murray Boyles, like huge freshman year last year. This team was fun to watch last year. Michi Johnson leading was that was a pretty big strike for them, but I think they get slaughtered in the SEC. And that just when you start looking at Clemson, then it's like, all right, like this is a game. If you want to be taken seriously, or you want the ACC to be taken seriously, like this is a game you should win. Like you start then looking up and down the ACC, and you're like, yikes! Like, well, what is it with Carolina nowhere near what they're supposed to be? Clemson looked like they might be turning into something, and then you lose this game. It's like I haven't looked today, but like the last time I looked at like the net conference rankings, I think that they were the ACC was below. They were below some. They're below the Big East. I thought at one point they were below either the Mountain West or the A-10. So right now they're sitting at 5th, which honestly, Joe, I don't know if you agree or disagree, but like hearing that the ACC is below the Big East is kind of a shock value to me because I feel like all we've done is talk about how down the Big East is, but the ACC looks to be down too. Obviously, I mean we know the ACC is down, but I just for me it's just like it's like a gut punch to think like the ACC is still even below the Big East. Like I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's showing up in the stats. I did not really think about it that way until this week when I think Clemson took this dive, and North Carolina just keeps on adding losses. Did they get a win later on that we're going to talk about, but keep on taking losses and to the resume. They had one team ranked in the AP top 25 this week. That's pretty crazy. And they have one team ranked in the top 30 of the net. So we're getting dangerously close to, I know most years we can at least get 3 or 4 teams out of the ACC, but we're getting dangerously close to talking about like a 2 or 3 bid league for the ACC, which is crazy. We have North Carolina at the net is 34, Clemson's 39, and then you keep on scrolling down, and like Louisville's the next ranked team, and they haven't really played that well this season with 5 losses already, and they're 52nd. That's the next team in the net, so it is very bad, and I'm like you. I'm surprised the Big East is ahead, but now that I look at it, I guess it makes more sense.
Joe, what I would love to see is this environment produce, like when we get to Selection Sunday and it's time for at-large bids, I'd love to see it produce like, Drake picked up a big win this weekend against or I can't remember which. No, that was during the week they played Kansas State. I mean, like I'd love teams like that to get in, but what I think we're going to end up with is we're going to end up with 14 SEC teams and like 11 or 12 Big Ten teams getting in. Like I think that's what's going to come of this.
Yeah, probably. I would. I mean, the record is 11 teams from one conference from the old Big East when they had all those teams that were awesome. I think it probably gets broken this year by one of these conferences, but there is some hope that that's the case, right? Like, if some of these teams get closer to 500, I think that's kind of like a bottom line they won't take. I hope, knock on wood, if you're a 500 team and somehow get in, that'd be gross. And I think we'll find out. I think there are some leagues that have some teams worth noting, whether it's Mountain West or whether it's WCC. Maybe the AAC can have other teams step up. I don't know. We'll talk about Memphis here at the end of the show, but I'm with you. I think that's definitely a concern moving forward. And hopefully, like, we have the non-conference schedule in hand. Like, we don't want to give credit to some teams. Maybe teams figure it out and they finish out, 25-5 or something. But for the most part, we don't want to like change too much of our opinion of how good a conference is from now until the end of the season because there aren't many data points between conferences either. So that'll be key watching down the stretch. Greg, let's get to Wednesday on a night where we have to mention this even if we're not going to talk about it too much, where Alabama wants to play at North Dakota in order to honor Grant Nelson. When Trayson Eaglestaff of North Dakota scored 40 points, he's a junior, so he's probably playing on someone else's team next year. So we also had another Jumpman Invitational game, and it was Michigan against Oklahoma. Michigan went up early. Oklahoma fights back. And Jeremiah Fears has had an incredible season so far. He scores 30 points in this one, 8 of 12 from the floor, 3 of 4 from three-point range, 11 of 13 from the line. Now, he makes a shot that was going to tie it and then ends up getting an and one on it. Very questionable if you look at the replay whether he was actually a foul or not, but he gets the call, hits the free throw, and at this point, Oklahoma stays undefeated on the season. They ended up winning another game this weekend too, so they're 12-0, and a team that has literally come out of nowhere that no one had expectations for, that were picked at the bottom of the SEC because they had a lot of new faces coming in, is 12-0. That's just incredible.
Yeah, luckily Oklahoma didn't lose this game. It would have killed the SEC's non-conference record of 169-22. It would have become 168-23. Just would have been a horrendous look for the SEC. Glad they were able to pull it out and not shame the conference. We talked about this game last week, and I mean, Joe, you kind of said it like, hey, it's Jeremiah Fears and whatnot, and I mean, like, it looks like, for all intents and purposes, like Michigan's got the game locked. Just don't do that one thing. If you're up 3, foul kind of, and you foul the 3-point shooter and he makes the butt. I mean, like, that's worst case scenario. So, and that kind of thing from a freshman is wild. I mean, I can't remember, Joe. Like, I mean, like, how often do you think we see something like this? Like, once every couple of years? Like, I mean, maybe it happens in a small conference tournament or something, but like, I just do not feel like you see like game-winning 4-point play all that often.
Yeah, not really. You don't see that very often, and what he's doing is incredible too. You're right. We see a lot of these freshmen go places, but like, it's usually places that have other 5-stars where they're not taking over the game themselves. They have other people, and even this year when you have 2 5-stars going to Rutgers, you have 2 different 5-stars kind of sharing things. But Jeremiah Fears kind of like showing up at Oklahoma and doing what he's doing is incredible, and gives them a lot of life heading into SEC play. Where, yeah, we could be in a situation where some of these teams end up falling and losing some games and being mediocre in conference play, but a team that's still a threat to maybe make a little run in March. So definitely worth watching these guys, and what he's doing is incredible too. And I don't think, Greg, this doesn't mean I feel any worse about Michigan. I kind of like, I was out on them at the start of the year. They kind of win some games, notably over like TCU, Xavier, Wisconsin. They've lost some to like Wake Forest, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. But even in their losses, they're one-possession games. And in the Big Ten that we've talked about so many times, like, we're looking for teams that are stepping up and winning some big games, and it seems like it's few and far between at this point. But they're a team that has won some decent games, so give them credit as well. This is a 1-point loss that arguably could have gone the other way very easily. So looking forward to seeing what they can do in Big Ten play for sure. All right, let's go over to a game that Greg was at on Friday. The ugliest basketball of all time is how I've seen it described by multiple people. I was not there in attendance. I've only watched replays of the game, but it seemed like it was pretty ugly. Seemed like the officials were letting them play a little bit, and that favored Cincinnati. But Cincinnati beats Dayton 66-59. This is in downtown Cincinnati, a neutral site game. Greg, you're going to have to give us an update here in a second about how the crowd split was. Was it 50-50 or something else along those lines? Dan Skillings is able to return from injury in this one for Cincinnati, 17 points. He's the high scorer for them. And Greg, I'm going to let you talk about Dayton a little bit here because you were in attendance, but it looked like maybe just not the best 3-point shooting night, and a night where you could have used it.
Yeah, I mean, they struggled offensively in the first half, but like, I mean, when I get it. Like, I saw some people. And we're going to give credit to the UC defense. I mean, they're top 5 on. I haven't checked in the last 24 hours. I'm assuming they probably didn't drop very much, but at least a top 10 defense on KenPom. But they just did. The Dayton offense just did not force the issue until the second half. The second half is I mean, just 17 in the first half, 42 in the second half. Like that tells you fundamentally they were doing something different. Like, I don't think the UC defense just like got up and left or anything. They were not forcing the issue. Like, yeah, the shooting was bad, but couldn't get it inside. Like, taking late shot clock contested shots. Like, it wasn't. And I mean, Malachi Smith he finishes the game with 6 turnovers, and just like he just was having trouble handling the ball. And again, some of that credit goes to like the UC defense and like, just the ball pressure. And, I just noticed little things like, we're we're teaching our fifth graders right now, like, just have your hands up on defense. And I was like, visibly see UC doing that. I don't see Dayton doing that. Like, it's the little things like that. But still, the one thing that I did not like was I saw Rothstein tweet that this was the best game Cincinnati's played all year. And I was like, if Dayton puts up 17 in the first half and you're not up double digits, they should have been up 20 in the first half. Dayton has not defended. I mean, they just haven't defended well all year. And I don't think they did a particularly great job this game either. I object to that statement. I'm not in any way saying UC is a bad team or they won't make the tournament. I'm just saying, like, the jury should still be out. And if that game that I saw is as he said, like, the best they have, like, I think they're a very gifted athletic team. The shooting at times is probably where they're going to struggle, but they do have some capable shooters, so that's there. But I think where they're gonna do their most damage is, kind of the high pick and rolls and the getting downhill to the hoop and that kind of stuff. Just they do have some athletes at the guards and inside, but I would hesitate to say, like, that sounds like hyperbole to me. And I know he does that sometimes, but, like, if that truly is the best game they've played all year, like, I would be more worried. I don't think it was. I objected to that statement on Twitter, and Twitter did not like that. Some people did, but my wife has been having fun going through my mentions and reading some of the things I was called on Twitter. So I can't say them because my mom listens to this podcast and my dad. But Joe, if you want to have fun, just go look at some of the things I was called on Twitter. So.
I saw a couple of them. I'm sure more have come in since that point, but yeah, definitely put yourself in the feet of the fire there. This is, I think you're right. This was not the best game they have played. I think what Rothstein meant to say was that this is the best win they have, because UC has not played anyone non-conference. They just played Xavier, but obviously it's a very banged up Xavier team. And maybe that Xavier win ends up being bigger than the Dayton win when it's all said and done. If Xavier can get things back on track, and they had a good week. They lost 2 games, but they played both games very physical against the Big East competition Xavier did. So it's very possible that could be something that changes. But I think he means that is the best win they've had, not this is the best they've played. Especially because he didn't really mention the defense in that tweet either. Like, if you're saying, hey, the first half defense was incredible, that's great.
Correct.
But I don't know. That's my take on it. And honestly, Dayton, I think they win this game. They're going to go as Malachi Smith goes. I'll put it that way. You mentioned the 6 turnovers, Greg. He has been so crucial in making them good. I think when he doesn't play well, that's when they're going to be having some losses. And fortunately for them, they're not going to play a team that's half as good as Cincinnati or any of the teams they played in the Maui the rest of the way. The A10 maybe gets in, a couple more extra teams this year, like we talked about with some of the spots open. But that's something to consider for Dayton side. And for Cincinnati, Greg, I texted you about this. I'm just going to let our listeners in on this. I'm with you. I don't know if we know how good Cincinnati is. They have a 10-1 record. They lost to Villanova. They beat a banged-up Xavier team. They beat Dayton. The Big 12 schedule for them is pretty manageable. Because Baylor got ranked, I think they have 5 games against top 25 teams in Big 12 play, 2 of those being Baylor. So before that, they had 3 games against top 25 teams in Big 12 play. So this might be a situation where we're watching in 3 weeks from now and we still feel like we don't know anything. Like, if the next 2 games they have are against Kansas State and Arizona, both those teams have struggled in their own regard and are near the bottom of the Big 12 projections at this point. If they win those 2 games and lose at Baylor and lose to Kansas, I think we're in the same boat. We don't know what they are. So just something to watch out for the future is, like, what you're saying is very true, that I'm not sure this is a tournament team, but I do think the Big 12 schedule is manageable for them. And maybe we'll see how much manageable it is for other teams, too. This was with it happened in college football, but with the bigger conferences, you're going to have some teams have very different schedules than other teams in the same conference, and it's going to be hard to kind of pick through these teams, even if we do get a lot more good games.
Yeah, I just want to clarify because I feel like some people may have, again, read because I said a version of what you said. Like, I think I said, like, if that's the best they can play, they are not a tournament team. I am not saying I do not believe they are a tournament team. What I meant was, if that's the absolute best they have, that's not a tournament team. and I'm happy you walked through that with where you think Ross team, because like absolutely that's their best win. It goes on a neutral. I mean, like if you just look at the resume, like just pure numbers, that is their best win. But I hate being on the fence about a team. Like I feel like not having an opinion at times is like, kind of, it's kind of cowardly. But like I like look through their resume and like tell me what gives you an indication of what this team is. Like a loss to Villanova, struggled against a Xavier team that's kind of shorthanded, although they had Fremantle in that game, and that was at home. Mm-hmm. They let UD, after a putrid first half, they let UD back into the game on a neutral court. You asked about the crowd split. I said walking in that I felt like it was 60-40 Dayton or 55-45 Dayton, but when the game got started, I just, from the visual, I felt like it was more Dayton, but the noise level made me feel like it was a pretty even split. Like I don't even care. Like forget whatever the actual numbers are. You could hand me a sheet of paper that said there were 10,000 UD fans there and 8,000 UC fans there, and I would say I don't care. It was if anything, I think the UC fans were louder. Product of I think a good start to the year. And we were talking at the game about how last year's game was kind of a little bit of a no contest. Maybe I mean UC cares about basketball, right? And thought maybe some people thought maybe UC would show out more this year, and I think they did. Again, I simply do not care what the numbers were. Those fans showed up, and they absolutely affected the game. Should be credited for that. But I just there's nothing yet, to tell me what this UC team. I think this is a great win for them, but I think there's like a long list of things that they need to improve on. And they might skate by, kind of like what you said, just with a lighter. I mean, Baylor, they get Kansas at home, which we should probably note that game and maybe that'd be one we try to go to just for fun. We're not gonna wear Xavier stuff in there, but Baylor twice. I mean, like even if you chalk all right, you chalk Kansas, Baylor, Iowa State, Houston. If you chalk all those games up as losses, I mean, they could still easily go they could still easily have a great record in the Big 12. I mean, you're right. That is one of these things that, you kind of already said, but just will be interesting going forward. I know a lot of these football conferences have gone away from the splitting. Like the Big Ten used to split the Legends and the whatever, and now the conference championship is just the best two records or whatever, but it still doesn't solve this like you're talking about, this scheduling thing, which is it is the downside of bigger conferences like this.
Yeah, I think the college basketball has kind of already dealt with this with the SEC. Kentucky would kind of get the tougher schedules in the SEC to kind of boost ratings, and it's just extended because you have more teams in the conference. So at least there's some familiarity with it. It's just going to be even more extreme this year. But yeah, I think it's 100% fair to say we don't know what UC can be. Like, are they a top 25 team? Gun to my head, I think so, but I also think that is not something that you want to say if you don't have a gun to your head. So that's great. Cincinnati beats Dayton on Friday, one of the ugliest games of the year. Let's move over to Saturday, Greg. We had some interesting matchups.
Joe, I just want to make one more note on Dayton.
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
Is a promising thing. If I want to have a main takeaway, that's two straight. Well, I didn't look at the shooting. The 3-point shooting wasn't good at UNLV either, but that's a game I would have expected them to win. But between the Marquette and the UC game, that's two straight marquee games that the 3-point shooting hasn't been there, and they won one and they hung in the other one. So I, for a while, thought this team was going to depend on that outside shooting just because of the lack of, they have some interior presence, but it seems like they're finding other ways to score, which is good. I'd like to see them defend a little better, but if you look at the difference in between the UC and the Marquette game, no turnovers in the second half in the Marquette game, 17 turnovers in this game. That's not the one key difference, but there's like a couple things that you can say like, all right, this team is not going to be entirely dependent on one thing, and they have some potential. Like it's still in my mind, I think, I said VCU might win the A10 this year, but like this Dayton team should win. They should win the A10. They shouldn't. They might, drop a game or two in conference, but they should be the season champion with, barring injuries. They should be the season champion. And, I guess anything can happen in the conference tournament. They should probably win that as well.
Definitely should be in the driver's seat for that, but I got to make sure not to take any bad losses in conference play for sure. And, when you're in one of these mid-major conferences, you can't afford some of these losses because your resume will be scrutinized heavier than some of the big conference teams. So we'll see how they do down the stretch, Greg. Let's move over to Saturday where there were some pretty big matchups. Started off with Purdue and Auburn, neutral site game, and Auburn kills them. This is not even close, 87-69. We've talked about Purdue a lot. They played a lot of big games, so credit to them, but they're 8-4 now. We've talked about Auburn a decent amount, but I don't even know if we talked about them enough. Always mentioned Janai Broome. He had 23 points in this one, leading scorer. Pettiford off the bench had 16. We had Denver Jones with 15, and that was like the majority of their scoring, and they still killed them. And they're 11-1 right now, Greg. They're number 2 in the country according to rankings. They took a loss at Duke at Cameron Indoor at a game that I think could have gone either way. Especially with how Isaiah Evans had to come in and kind of save Duke. This is the best team in the country. I don't care what the rankings say. This is the best team in the country. They've played a decently tough schedule, and they are coming out on top. Look at the wins: Houston, Iowa State, North Carolina, Purdue, and then their only losses at Duke, Cameron Indoor. I mean, crazy that I think, they should be ranked number 1, regardless of other teams being undefeated, and just a team that probably hasn't gotten enough publicity, maybe because they're not a blue blood, but they are. I don't know how to put this other than like if you were picking a national champion today, I think most of the brackets would pick Auburn.
Yeah, Joe. I'm just curious. I'll give my piece. If you want to look this up, I'm just curious what the national title. They have to be the front runner right now. I'm curious what the futures are. If you want to just,
I'll pull it up. Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah. You go through your thing. I'll pull it up for sure.
So the thing with Auburn, and I think we're used to like hard nosed, like physical, like defensive minded team, and they've like kind of morphed into this, over the last couple of years, like, hey, we are gonna play better defense than most, but we're also going to chuck threes. And now my dog has a toy, so that's what you're hearing in the background. We're going to chuck threes, and every other shot's going to be right next to the basket. Basically, they do take some mid range, but there's just so many weapons. And I know the news with Janai Broome getting hurt in a nothing game early in the week. We're worried about his shoulder. He ends up playing. Casual 23 points, 11 boards is what it is. Like just like nothing. I mean, like you look at this, they kick Purdue's butt, and they get 5 from Miles Kelly, who we're not that far away from, talking about how he was just draining shots, against a couple of different teams. I mean, they get 8 from Baker Mazzara. You got 18 off the bench from like there's just options. And I don't mean like I've said options like other teams like, hey, like they can go different ways. I mean, like they have elite scoring opportunities, not just in their starting lineup. They have a couple coming off the bench. Like, how the AP voters work. Like, all right, you don't lose, you don't move down. Like this team, you're right. This team is the best in the country. And I don't know if you have it up. Do you have the title odds?
It is. They are the favorites at plus 700. So that is an incredible number for a favorite for anything. So maybe look at placing your bets on that. The second favorite is Duke at plus 900, which was kind of shocking to me too. But they are the favorites, and they should be. So you can get some pretty good value there. I don't know if you want to test the fates of maybe the Hurley family by betting against UConn to go on a three-peat because of how well he's played since we started doubting him and everyone else did. But just incredible that they are in the position they are and are the favorites.
Yeah, but I think you make a good point. I mean, like sometimes it's the number next to the name. Like, well, I'm not used to seeing that number next to that name. It's not a blue blood. So, you might get a better number on them to, the voting, or not the voting, the betting markets might not be, I know you said you're surprised that Duke's second. Well, they do have, one of the best defenses in the country. They have one of the best prospects in the country. Like, it doesn't surprise me all that much, just thinking about how people, just where people put their money and whatnot. But that's also happens to be the only team they lost to. They lose to them at Cameron Indoor. But I mean, this Auburn, like, I'm telling you, like, they play in a tournament game. Again, right now, today, I'm taking Auburn. Like, I took, if you remember when we were talking about that Duke Auburn game, like, I took Duke because it was in Cameron, and that was honestly my main. Like, I have nothing against Duke. Like, I think they're a good team, but I felt like, and I know I've said this several times this year, like, I felt like these home floors are just having a bigger impact. This, again, completely anecdotal. I'd love to see someone run some numbers on it. Joe, if you want to have the Game House statistician go ahead and run those numbers, which I'm assuming that's probably you. If you want to go ahead and run those numbers, I don't know. I would love to have something in front of me to give to people, but I can't help but think, like, how many times we've been talking about, this game wasn't home court, but it was in Birmingham, so, like, it might as well have been home court for Auburn. It just feels like that kind of stuff is mattering more.
I don't want to run the numbers yet, but it's something that we should note to do at the end of the season once conference play is done, because we haven't seen a lot of road games yet. I mean, we see a lot of neutral site games in non-conference, and that's not fun because we like seeing campuses host some of these big games. But definitely should run the numbers at some point. And like, the odds are just a reflection of KenPom, basically. Like, maybe you could tier it a little bit, but the first four are straight out of KenPom. And so that's, like, everyone has their own algorithm, whether it's analytics or whatever it is you're using to put these champions on there. But I think with how dominant, minus that one game at Duke, which again could have gone either way, I would expect them to be a little bit worse odds for us to bet. So I think that, plus 700, something to think about if you are a gambling person out there. Greg, let's move on to UCLA and UNC. Now, I am not a fan of either of these teams, and I'm not saying that in terms of, like, I don't like that. Like, obviously, I'm a Kentucky fan. I don't like them for whatever reasons. I don't like either team. I don't think either of them are actually that good, but North Carolina gets the win here, 76-74. So my point is, I'm going to keep it pretty short and sweet because I do think UCLA is going to start falling down when we get closer to conference play here. But the key for North Carolina in this one is Ian Jackson scoring 24 points. If North Carolina wants to dig out of their hole, which we already talked a lot about them before too, it's Ian Jackson stepping up and being this guy. They're obviously never going to get anything from the post this season, so this is how they have to do it.
Hey, Joe, weird story. Tell me if you've heard this before. Carolina falls behind early, comes back with a late surge. Yep. I don't know if we've ever heard this one before. Definitely not twice in the same week. Definitely not several times in the same season. But I mean, they happened to pull this one out. Neutral site, Madison Square Garden. So UCLA had to travel a bit farther. You would think, like, Carolina would have every advantage except, it being at home. But, I know we've had this story several times with Hubert Davis now where the team just doesn't meet expectations, but I just think there's no way they can be not a tournament team. I just am stuck on they've got to be at least a top 15 team. And it might not be reflected right now because they haven't gotten none of their losses are bad, but they also haven't gotten, the good wins. That inside game is their front court is probably what's killing them. I mean, it's not probably it is what's killing them, but I don't know, Joe. Maybe if they play a little smaller, they can take advantage of that kind of extra speed. I mean, like, that's where they're getting a lot of their points. Like, it really intrigues me to, like, if you could say, hey, Greg, there's no games going on this week. You want to pick a matchup, you can go ahead and create it. I would love to see Carolina go play Michigan and just see, like, what style wins out. I probably, depending on where the game is, I'd probably pick Michigan. which is wild because I just picked Carolina to win twice this week. But I don't know. I that's where my head goes, is like thinking about stylistic differences, like that. It's a good win. It's a good win for Carolina. 7-5 is not a nice record to look at, but when you look at their like the nitty gritty of it, like it's like, all right, maybe they can turn this season into something. It's gonna involve beating a lot of teams that they're supposed to beat. I mean, they probably should win almost every game in the ACC. If they can steal one from Duke, I think that I'd take that as a win. If they can get the home game, I don't think they do. Maybe I'll change my. So that game is the home game for them is the last. It's the very last game of the year. Maybe it'll be a completely different look by then, but I just I heard someone else say this, like I won't take credit for it, but like if you start looking at what they have upcoming, like you could easily see them having 3 losses in ACC play, and like that record alone will just make them a decent seed in the tournament.
Sorry, I'm in shock. You said they're a top 15 team.
I can't quit. Like when we had the year where they were the number 1 ranked team and like it just wasn't working out, and like they didn't make the tournament, like I was able to get off the train, but there's something about watching this team that makes me think that they're good, and they've just had the ball bounce the wrong way in. I know it's like 5 or 6, it's 5 games, but like I don't know, man. I can't quit them. I picked them twice to win last week. I mean, and then we're sitting here and I'd say I would pick Michigan to beat them. So like, who knows if I can even make up my own mind? But there's something about them. I can't get off the train. I've already said this before, but like, think about how different the narrative on the season is if like they don't blow the game to Kansas. And maybe they get like one of these, like this, they complete the comeback against Florida, then they've got this, like, that's not a far stretch. And I know living in like the hypothetical world, like, okay, that's cool. But like, they're really not like that far from having a pretty stupendous, like the only teams that have just run over them are Auburn and Bama. And like, those are different.
I don't like looking at things that way personally, because you could also look at it the other way of like, what if the ball bounced differently and they lost to Dayton or Georgia Tech, who was a 1-possession game, or UCLA? And again, Dayton's probably the best out of those 3 in my opinion. I don't think UCLA is that good, to be honest. So here's what I'll say. I agree with the fact that they could be top 15 by the end of their schedule, because they do have a lot of winnable games. I don't think this is a top 15 team though, when we got kind of buckle it down. If you kind of like had me go through and like, not rank based on resume, but rank who I think is the best team, I think they'd be closer to like 25. And I do think that their interior play is just so bad that it's going to be hard to make up for it. I agree with them going small, by the way, too. That's like, you have to put your 5 best players on the floor at some point, because that's how bad the interior play is. But I don't know. I think this is we've talked a lot about North Carolina. I won't keep it too much more, but I think they have a lot of proving themselves to do. And even if they get to the point where like they're winning a lot of games in the ACC, Greg, at what point do you get the faith to pick them in a big game if they haven't won one, minus this one if you count it, which again, I don't think UCLA is that good this year. We'll see. They beat Oregon. Oregon has some big wins. I don't know, man. I think it's going to be they're going to be one of the more interesting cases there. And then, honestly, if we get to the point where they do win a lot of ACC games, is it just like Gonzaga, where everyone said, I know you don't say this, Greg, but everyone says, like, hey, their conference stinks. They haven't played anyone. ACC is getting to that level at this point. So, just something to think about here as we move along, because talent-wise, they probably have top 15, but they certainly aren't playing like a top 15 team. And that's not what you're saying either, so I understand. Greg, I think you're on mute while you're talking here, buddy. So you gotta unmute somehow. All right. Well, he's figuring that out. we will continue on. Greg, you can come back to North Carolina when we're done with this. I'll start recapping the Ohio State-Kentucky game while you figure it out. Ohio State kills Kentucky's 85-65. Ohio State had a big Saturday with you include their college football playoff victory over Tennessee. This is a game where Kentucky shot 18.2% from three and really didn't have anything going, so they kept on going to Otega Oweh to score 21 points. He didn't shoot that well from the floor either, but he made all his free throws, which was nice. Ohio State really pulled away late. They get Bruce Thornton scoring 30 points. He's a phenomenal player. When he has it going, he can kind of go off. And then Aaron Bradshaw in the revenge game against Kentucky has 11 points. Now, the impressive thing for Ohio State was no Meechie Johnson in this one. I think this is kind of the nature, like I'm not reading too much into it either way. I still have my doubts about Ohio State, and I still have a lot of faith in Kentucky this season because I think it's just how the way college basketball is going to go if you're not an elite team, which I would not put Kentucky in an elite way. You're going to lose some games that you shouldn't, especially when you rely on the three so much, and it's going to take a lot of work to get them to where they need to be. At Ohio State, they can win some big games, and they have some good players, even without Meechie Johnson. But, like, can we expect guys like Aaron Bradshaw to show up every night? Can we expect 30 points a night from Bruce Thornton? No. And that's the tough part here that we have to deal with. So, good win for Ohio State, though. They needed to get a good win before they go into conference play. And now Kentucky has a lot of things to think about. Greg, are you back?
I think we're back.
We're good.
Back?
We're back.
We're good. Everyone give Joe a pat on the back. I had some sort of my page refreshed, and then when I came back in, Joe and I have had issues with microphones before where it just selects the wrong source with the program we use. So glad, Joe, you said you couldn't hear me because that told me right where to go, and now we're fixed. Someone asked me about this game, and I just said sports broken. It was like every time I think I have stuff figured out, like a result like this happens. It's a lot. I mean, when you take a step back and you look at this event, the CBS Sports Classic as a whole, like it's like, all right, like two wild results. You know, again, like you could start to be like, well, you know, the 3-point shooting wasn't there, and it was a neutral site game, and like Ohio State's been up and down, but like still, you know. I know we say, you know, we just got done talking about a game, you know, a team where we're like, hey, you know, if the ball bounces a different way, but I still think like when the results matter, you know, maybe isolated if you have one bad game, you know, it doesn't matter as much. Now, so the other loss for UK was the Clemson loss, which I felt like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that one was pretty much Clemson ran the whole way with that one as well, right? It wasn't anywhere near this. Right?
No, I mean, Clemson had control of the game. They ended up winning by 4, but it was a close game, but Clemson had control, put it that way.
But so, you know, the only thing you want to talk about is like, is the three, you had shared a tweet, you know, in one of our groups, you know, like someone was questioning, like, is the 3-point shooting even there? But like, if you look up and down this roster, like there are 3-point shooters. There's plenty of them. Like I you know, it's weird to hit like a stretch of games where several guys are not hitting, but you know, I still think this team has enough good shooting that they can somewhat rely on that as like their calling card.
I'm with you. I think the questions are valid at this point, especially with Kirk Kriisa out. As you know, all his flaws, he is a good 3-point shooter, and honestly in this game it would have been nice to have that spark off the bench too. But I think what kind of brings it down is like Lamont Butler and Otega Oweh aren't known as 3-point shooters, and they're in the starting lineup. You know, Amari Williams at center as well. So that leaves like 3 of your starters not being the greatest 3-point shooters, or at least like not the most proven ones, I guess I'll say. You have Jackson Robinson and you have Andrew Carr can shoot the threes. And yes, we're coming off a game against Louisville where Lamont Butler is perfect from the field, including from 3. But just not as consistent either. But so you have 2 guys who can shoot well from 3-point range in the starting lineup. You have plenty of people off the bench who can shoot well from 3, including Kobe Brea, who did go 2 for 7, so not the greatest performance from him in this one. But it's something to question maybe the lineup structure. Maybe you shake up the lineup. There's enough shooting on this team; they'll figure it out. And when getting Kirk Kriisa healthy will help as well. But I'm with you. I'm not willing to sell on the idea yet. I think as we saw with Mark Pope at BYU, they're going to pull off some good wins, some good upsets with this style of play. They will have some bad shooting nights where they'll lose. And I think the plan is, as the season goes on, to make better reads with his offense, which gives the players a lot of options on how to operate and kind of cut down on, hey, if you're missing your threes, maybe we get someone get to the basket. Or maybe we start hitting our threes more and we just won't have many games where everyone misses threes. The problem I think Kentucky fans have is our biggest scars in terms of like biggest losses. A lot of times it's because the 3-point shot isn't falling. I think against West Virginia at one point in the 2010 Elite Eight, it was like 1 for 22 from three, and that obviously wasn't the same strategy. It wasn't the same. Wasn't a lot of good 3-point shooters on that team. It was John Wall, Eric Bledsoe, DeMarcus Cousins' team, John Calipari's first team, like at Kentucky. So that's like one of the scars. So it's a valid question, but I'm with you. I'm not ready to sell on these guys yet. Just maybe change up the lineup here or there to kind of get the shooters together and figure it out.
Joe, I do want to just emphasize something you just said. I think understatement of importance. A guy like Kerr Kriisa in a game like this is probably perfect. It's probably I'm not saying they win the game, but like when nothing else is hitting and you're down, you want the emotional guy that has zero conscience and just goes in there and plays at 100 miles an hour. Like, again, I'm not saying they win this game, but like he didn't have that card. He didn't have that piece. Like Pope couldn't play that guy. And again, we've already said it. We have our qualms with Kerr Kriisa, but like this is the game and situation he's made for. Like sometimes you almost want to take him out of a game that like you've got control of, just because he can be unpredictable and whatnot, and can be a bit erratic. But like this, like you put him in this game, what's the word? Like you lose by 30 instead of 20. Like oh darn. Mm-hmm. But like you also very much could get the flip side with a guy like him, where you all of a sudden are on a 15-0 run, and then again we don't know what would have happened, and it is injuries happen to every team, next man up, blah blah blah. But I think sometimes there's some pieces that you're like, man, having that guy in this situation, very well could have tipped the scales.
Right, and one of his biggest flaws is defense, and if you're not stopping anyone anyway, who cares? Who cares? Sometimes you need guys to just put up points, and not if you're going to be in a shootout. Sometimes you need the guys to put up those points. So, good point by you, and we will keep it moving. We'll come back to these teams, I'm sure, later on in the season as they have bigger games coming up. Greg, let's go to some quick hitters before we get to our picks for the week. We had some games that we don't want to dive into too much. We've already been talking for almost an hour on a week where there's not much to talk about in the upcoming portion of it. But Princeton beats Rutgers. My Princeton Tigers mentioned at the start of the season. Xavier Lee has a pretty big game. He's a guy to know. And just they're a team in the Ivy League that can win it and possibly win a game in the tournament, like I said on our preseason show. Mississippi State beats Memphis and really doesn't have a problem with them at all. Xavier plays Marquette tough. They are unable to get the win. So two things to dissect there, Greg, and I'm going to let you get your thoughts on all these games when we're all done with them. But Marquette kind of struggling right now. Xavier, on the other hand, battling tough in the Big East. Mount St. Mary's beats Miami. Kansas State ends up losing to Wichita State. That is a kind of off-the-court issues going on with Kansas State. A lot of Coleman Hawkins talk about how he's the $8 million man or whatever, or $2 million man, I think it was, and how he's not producing. So it is a kind of a weird situation there as well. And Wichita State is not the same Wichita State it was 10 years ago. So, Greg, any big thoughts on those games as a kind of a quick hitter?
I'll just take these in the order that I had them. I mean, we already mentioned Princeton at the beginning of the season. Got a possible or probable first round NBA draft pick on the team. The Rutgers side of things, it's like fun dudes, fun to watch, but like, gonna need a lot to not for us to, if we want to see them in the tournament, they're going to need to do a lot of work in the Big Ten. It would be a shame, to have two, top 10 picks miss the tournament when they're playing on the same team. But like, some of this is just the way college basketball works right now. Sometimes being older is better. Although we just come off talking about tonight, we're talking about how Oklahoma is being led by Jeremiah Fears. So like everything's situational, but still would be a crying shame to not have them in the tournament. But they got a lot of work to do. Memphis misses out on a big opportunity. They'll have another one this week that we'll talk about in a second here. Xavier, you want to talk about the ball bouncing the wrong way between Traore getting hurt and, Fremantle's now out for, an indefinite amount of time. I don't know if we've even gotten anything definite on that. Trey Green left the team, for whatever reason. And during all that time, you have this week, which I didn't put on our little quick hits because quick hits was really specifically talking. I just wanted to talk about, other things that happened on a busy Saturday. But, they go back a week. They, almost beat UC at UC in the crosstown shootout. That's, obviously an emotional game. This week, they take UConn to overtime, and then they lose by 2 against Marquette at home. I mean, that is just this team just can't catch a break, man. And it feels like we've had some sort of thing like this more than once in the last couple of years. Where just things, specifically talking about the injuries, and obviously it's been repeat for Fremantle, but there's been other places where it's man, if this team could just stay healthy. So I don't know. Mm-hmm. Miami, Mount St. Mary's, I mean, there's your state of the ACC. That's just where they're at right now. You'd think with just as good a coach as Larinaga is, I mean, we're not that far removed from them being a Final Four team, and I'm not saying the same pieces are there, but it's the same coach. I never thought they'd be this bad. I think they're 4-8 now, and the funny thing is going to be, Joe, when they play this bad in non-conference and then they're 3rd in the ACC. That's going to be the wild thing. And that may end up saying more about the ACC than anything else. The Kansas State thing, I already kind of mentioned it, but they lose to Drake and then they lose to Wichita State. And I Coleman Hawkins he hit a shot to tie the game against Drake, and then Drake goes down and they hit a shot to win the game on the next sequence. I mean, they spent a lot of NIL money on putting their roster together. And I remember talking about, we talked about, how there was a unique situation for Tang's first year. And then we talked about last year, how, they might take a step back, and they kind of did. And now it's I think it might be it's wild to say, but I think it might be okay for Kansas State fans to have some questions about Jerome Tang. I'm not saying I'm just saying it should be in the balance for him when we look at, hey, you had everything go right for you your first year, and that's how you got to the Elite Eight or whatever. Now look at what we've done since, and it's again, dude's only been the coach for, this is his 3rd year, but it's just weird to see how different Baylor is without him on staff. And then he goes and, has a fantastic first year, and then it's kind of fallen off a cliff since, even though, they've on paper, had some talented teams. So. Yeah,
just a guy that I know I do in coach rankings every season. And it's after his first Final Four, I didn't put him in the top 25, and some people had issues with it, and it's just sometimes, 1 year isn't a good enough sample size when you're comparing resumes of possible Hall of Famers. So I'd rather be a season late on adding a guy to the top 25, and he's kind of the reason why, because it's been all bad since that point. And you're right, they should have questions about him. Coach L for Coach Larinaga, he's had these big swings in his career too, where he has really bad years, and he swings it right back and gets the Final Four. I don't know if he has it in him. Might be watching the last season he's going to coach as he gets up there in age. And I'll say the last thing I'll say is Mississippi State, really impressed with them this year, and they're winning that game against Memphis without Josh Hubbard having a huge night, which is really big for them. Excited to see what they can do in SEC play when it all gets tougher. Greg, let's go to our picks for this Saturday. We're going to start off with Ole Miss and Memphis. Again, not much going on during the week, so we're moving right to Saturday. This one's in FedEx Forum in Memphis. Greg, who do you got?
Memphis has got to have it. I don't think that even with SEC dominance, I don't think they can miss out on 2 straight opportunities like this to pick up a quality win. They're not going to get a lot from the AAC. Got to have it. I'll take Memphis at home.
Yeah, I'm going Memphis as well. I like the scoring backcourt they have. I think they can figure this one out. Ole Miss has some other decent wins. It's not as crucial for them as you mentioned, Greg. The loss they have is to Purdue, so it's not even that bad of a loss. So I like Ole Miss I just haven't seen enough from them to kind of like really think that they can win this game on the road. It should be a coin flip, and if that's what we're going with here, I think Memphis can win it. All right, next one up, we have Utah State, San Diego State. Now, my guy, Jared Calhoun, has done a phenomenal job at Utah State. I believe it's the best start in school history or best start in a long, long time at 11-1, going up against a ranked San Diego State team in a Mountain West game on Saturday, 6 p.m. Fox. Greg, who are you going with?
Joe, just before I get into this game, just remind the people your connection to Jared Calhoun, just for people who might not have heard it before.
Oh, I started cheering for the Youngstown State Penguins, and he was the coach and followed me, and he moved on to Utah State, so I need to get myself a Utah State shirt to keep on supporting them. And one more note before you pick, Greg. This is a Utah State team 11-1. It's like you might think, oh man, they haven't played anyone. They beat Iowa. I mean, I don't know how good Iowa is, but it's not. They played at least one power conference team and got a win. That's pretty impressive. And St. Mary's.
Iowa, and they beat St. Mary's. They lost to UC San Diego, who I believe also beat somebody. Didn't they also beat? No, this is again great podcasting. I thought, here we go. They're behind the net. They're 59th. I swear, I wanted to say it was San Diego State they beat, but no, they hung with San Diego State, and San Diego State pulled it out. So not nothing to shake a stick at kind of thing. Like, it's it seems 60th in the net. Like if it didn't say UC San Diego by it, like you'd be like, okay, like that's a Q1 road game. It's a Q2 away game. Like again, it says UC San Diego, so you think, oh, whatever. But like I said, they beat St. Mary's. So Utah State does have they have a gaudy record, but they also have a little bit of a resume to go along with that record. Games at San Diego State. This is a conference game. Mountain West. I will take San Diego State at home. Just like Brian Dutcher and that San Diego State defense to get it done.
I'm going to go San Diego State as well, as much as it pains me to do it. They're at home in this one. I think if it was flipped and it was on the road, I would take Utah State. San Diego State's defense is really good. It usually is most years, and I think that's going to be the difference in this one, playing at home. We have the next one up. We have Gonzaga, UCLA. This is a neutral site game. I know Greg has some tidbits on it. Greg, you also, we have a pick sheet in front of us. You made some mistakes on your 2 or 3 first picks that you have to correct. You picked some teams that aren't playing. But we have Gonzaga, UCLA, some history in this one. We have, the Adam Morrison game way back when. That gets a lot of talk about. We had a Final Four game a couple of years ago. Greg, where are you leaning this year?
I am gonna take Gonzaga. Although, as Joe and I talked about before the podcast started, something I was just curious. I was like, I feel like between. There was the Final Four game where Jalen Suggs hits the bank end 3 to win, and then there was the other game, the Sweet 16 game. There was that game came down to the last 1 or 2 possessions as well. I mean, they've had some all timers, especially in the tournament. But I told Joe, I was like, I was just curious what the series was like between these two schools. It's actually officially Gonzaga 7 and UCLA 2. But I told Joe I noticed on the Gonzaga page, like I don't know what made me click on it, because I had already looked at the UCLA page or whatever. Gonzaga's their like website of their history of this rivalry or this opponent is missing the 2006 Sweet 16 game. A pretty go look it up. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about that particular game, but it's a famous tournament game, and it's just not there. That's the same year that the Slipper Still Fits was that when they beat Florida that same year? Was that the game before? I can't remember what game that tagline comes from. That's what I'm trying to remember. If that's the same year, was that a different year?
That wasn't the Florida year, but that was when the Slipper Still Fits was the Adam Morrison.
Okay.
Run, I believe. I think.
So this game it's hidden from their, I guess it's nothing official. It's just a website. Like somebody has to update this, but like this one result is not there. and it's wild to think that, like they played one time in '99, and it looks like it was just, a good old non-conference game before Gonzaga became what Gonzaga is. They actually won. It's just interesting. So Joe and I we'll do some tweeting at the Gonzaga account this week. I'm sure we'll get nothing back, but just curious if we'll get a response. Is that's just an oversight, or if Joe, I believe, I don't want to use your words, but I think you said something along the lines of like maybe it's just such a painful loss that Gonzaga has it, they want to bury it, kind of thing. So I'll still take Gonzaga. I can't imagine that you're going to be thinking any different just with the thoughts you just kind of had on UCLA, but I'll take Gonzaga in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I think playing against Mick Cronin's team is tough, and that could be like a matchup that maybe doesn't favor Gonzaga. But I really do think that they obviously always do this, but they tested themselves out of conference. One of their losses is in Battle for Atlantis. They played Kentucky and UConn back-to-back, two teams that I still think are very good. They do have some other good wins. They beat Baylor. They beat San Diego State. I think that maybe just like that was a lot, and then their last two losses being Kentucky and UConn. Like I think people may be reading too much into it. I think they're still, I had them as a top 5 team preseason. I still think they have that potential. They shouldn't have lost this many games. Shouldn't have lost to West Virginia, but I think this is like the get back on track before they go right in a conference play game. I trust their roster. I trust their players way more than I trust UCLA's at this point. Being neutral site, I think, helps, and I think that they get the win here and kind of get things back on. I don't think it's too far off track, to be honest, but it's kind of get things back on track to where it should be. So those are our picks for the week. Greg, any final thoughts before we log off here?
I'm getting the tweet ready to fire off now. We'll see if Gonzaga's Twitter says anything.
I would actually love to get, even if it's a witty response or even just clarification that maybe how we're missing something. That'd be great too. I'm kind of wondering where we are with that.
I'll just say this on air with Joe. I said what I said before was like I was like, oh, maybe they played like in an NIT game or something. Like I noticed the record differential. And I was like, like that would obviously be a reasonable like, all right, we're not going to count that. Whatever, fine. But like that, this is like a monumental game. Like it has to just be an oversight, but it's just a wild one to be missing.
I hope that you do it from your personal account and not a podcast account, because I hope you get that many insults from other people again that we can all read the replies.
Fine.
That'd be great.
I was gonna do it from the pod account.
No, let's see let's see what names they call you this time. But yeah, so I definitely we'll keep everyone updated on this saga. Probably nothing will be answered. We'll forget about it by next week. But if something happens, we'll make sure to update people. Everyone, make sure to enjoy the holidays. Enjoy this time where it is downtime, but there are still college basketball games. So watch if you want. Go spend time with your family if you want. My turn to remind everyone to like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. And then if you can go like and subscribe on the YouTube channel to the Game House YouTube channel, that helps us out as we move along here. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.